I'm changing the locks." My son didn't whisper it. He laughed when he said it. He thought I couldn't hear him through the half-open office door of the care home. He was wrong. I had only stepped away to refill my coffee while the administrator finished printing my admission paperwork. My son, Daniel, had walked outside to answer his phone. I wasn't trying to listen, but when someone mentions changing the locks on the home you've lived in for 43 years, you don't have to try. You hear every word. "Yeah," he chuckled. "She'll be staying here for a while. By the time she realizes what's happening, the locksmith will already be finished." A short pause, then another laugh. "Don't worry. Once the doctor signs off that she's not capable of living alone anymore, everything gets a lot easier." My fingers tightened around the paper coffee cup. For just a second, I thought I might have misunderstood him. Maybe he was talking about another property, another family, another conversation. Then he said the address. My address. The little white brick house on Willow Lane. The house my husband and I bought when we were 29. The house where we raised Daniel. The house where my husband took his last breath. No, there was no misunderstanding. My own son was already making plans to lock me out of my home before I'd even spent my first night away. The strange part? I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was disappointed, because at that exact moment, I realized something Daniel didn't. He believed he'd been planning this for months. I'd been planning for years. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 78 years old. I spent 36 years teaching American history at Lincoln High School before retiring. People often assume older people stop paying attention, that we don't notice small changes, that we don't read the documents put in front of us, that we simply trust whatever our children tell us. Daniel believed every one of those things. He forgot one important detail. History teachers learn to read every line, especially the fine print. Everything began 6 months earlier. It started with kindness, or at least something that looked like kindness. Daniel began visiting more often. He brought groceries. He fixed a loose cabinet door. He insisted on mowing my lawn even though I'd always managed it myself. Friends told me how lucky I was. "You've raised a wonderful son." I smiled every time. I have, because I believed it. After my husband Charles passed away 9 years earlier, Daniel became my closest family. His wife, Melissa, was always pleasant. My 2 granddaughters filled the house with laughter whenever they visited. Sunday dinners became our tradition. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt safe. Looking back, I can see exactly when things started changing. The conversations became less about me and more about the house. "Mom," Daniel asked one afternoon, "have you ever thought about downsizing?" I laughed. "Every spring when I have to pull weeds." "I'm serious." "So am I." He smiled politely. "It's a lot of work for one person." "It keeps me moving." "You'd have less stress somewhere smaller." "I like my stress." He laughed. I thought the conversation was over. It wasn't. Over the following months, the suggestions became more frequent. "What if you fell? What if there was an emergency? What if no one found you?" Each question sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they painted a picture of someone fragile, someone incapable, someone who needed rescuing. I noticed something else. Every time he visited, he'd ask about paperwork. "Where do you keep your important documents? Have you updated your will? Who's listed on your accounts? Do you still have the deed?" I answered politely, sometimes honestly, sometimes vaguely. Old age teaches you that not every question deserves a detailed answer. Then came the doctor's appointment. Daniel insisted on driving. "It's easier," he said. "I don't mind." The appointment itself was routine. My blood pressure was good. My heart was strong. My memory tests were normal. The physician smiled as she reviewed my chart. "I wish all my 78-year-old patients were doing this well." I thanked her. As we walked toward the parking lot, Daniel seemed strangely quiet. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "Oh, nothing." It wasn't nothing. A week later, he returned with brochures. Beautiful buildings, private rooms, gardens, libraries, exercise classes. "This place is incredible," he said enthusiastically. I looked at the cover. A senior living community. "I didn't ask for this." "I know." "Then why are we discussing it?" "Because I worry." I reached across the kitchen table and squeezed his hand. "I appreciate that." "I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly." He leaned forward. "I just want you somewhere safe." Those words stayed with me. Somewhere safe. Safety is a powerful word. People rarely argue against it. But I had spent my entire career teaching students one important lesson. Sometimes the reason someone gives you isn't the real reason. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became increasingly persistent. He started mentioning stories from the news. An elderly woman who fell, a man who forgot to turn off his stove, someone who wandered away from home. Every story ended the same way. "You see why I'm worried?" I nodded. "I do." What I didn't tell him was that I had started becoming worried too. Not about living alone, about why my son seemed so determined to convince me I couldn't. One rainy afternoon, I was searching for an old photo album in the hallway closet when I noticed something unusual. A folder had fallen behind a storage box. It contained copies of insurance papers, tax records, property documents. Nothing strange. Until I reached the final page. It wasn't mine. It was a printed estimate for a complete home renovation. New kitchen, new flooring, interior demolition, luxury bathroom remodel. Estimated cost? $286,000. Across the top, someone had handwritten 4 words. "After Mom moves out." I stared at the page for a long time. There was no signature, no date, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to my son. That evening, I quietly placed every document back exactly where I had found it. I didn't mention the folder. I didn't ask questions. I simply smiled when Daniel called to check on me. Because from that moment forward, I stopped assuming we were having the same conversation. He was talking about my future. I was beginning to investigate his. And before either of us realized it, one of us was about to discover that reading the papers can change everything. For the next 2 weeks, I said nothing, not because I was afraid, because I wanted the truth before I confronted anyone. Teaching history for 36 years had taught me something that served me well outside the classroom. Never accuse someone based on suspicion. Wait for the facts. Facts have a way of speaking much louder than emotions. So I watched. I listened. And I paid attention. Daniel called every evening. "How was your day, Mom?" "Quiet." "Did you remember to take your medicine?" "I've never forgotten." "You should think about getting one of those emergency alert necklaces." "I'll consider it." Every conversation ended the same way. He sounded like a caring son. Anyone listening would have admired him. But I had begun hearing something beneath the words. He wasn't asking whether I was happy. He was collecting evidence that I was getting older. One Saturday, he offered to organize my filing cabinet. "You've got so many papers in here," he said with a laugh. "I know exactly where everything is." "I could help." "I don't need help." He smiled, but I caught the brief look of disappointment on his face. That look lasted only a second. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Later that afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found him photographing the breaker panel. "What are you doing?" "Oh, just sending Melissa a picture." "Of my electrical box?" He quickly lowered his phone. "She was asking about the house." The answer made no sense, but I simply nodded. That night, after he left, I sat in Charles's old reading chair. The house was silent except for the ticking grandfather clock. Charles used to say, "When something doesn't make sense, don't force it to. Wait. The truth usually catches up." I smiled at the memory. He had been gone for 9 years, yet somehow his advice still arrived exactly when I needed it. The following Tuesday, I had lunch with my oldest friend, Judith. We had known each other since college. There was very little we kept from one another. She took one look at my face and asked, "What's wrong?" I hesitated. Then I told her everything. The questions about my finances, the renovation estimate, the conversations about moving, the care home brochures. Judith didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she quietly stirred her tea. "Eleanor?" "Yes?" "My sister went through something similar." I looked at her. Her son convinced her to sign paperwork she barely read. "What happened?" "He refinanced her home." My stomach tightened. It took years to untangle. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Judith leaned closer. "Promise me something." "What?" "Before you sign anything, let an independent attorney read it." I smiled. "I already have one." "You do?" "I've had one for years." She looked relieved. Charles and I had hired an estate attorney nearly 12 years earlier, not because we distrusted Daniel, because we believed good planning prevented unnecessary conflict. After Charles passed away, I continued meeting with that attorney every year, whenever laws changed, whenever taxes changed, whenever my wishes changed. My documents changed too. I never mentioned those meetings to Daniel. They weren't a secret. He simply never asked. The next morning, I scheduled another appointment. When I arrived, my attorney, Rebecca Lawson, greeted me warmly. "It's good to see you again, Eleanor." "I wish it were under happier circumstances." She noticed my expression immediately. "What happened?" I handed her the renovation estimate. Then I described everything that had happened over the past several months. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. "You did the right thing by coming." "I hope I'm overreacting." She gave a sympathetic smile. "I hope so too." She opened my file. Several neatly organized documents rested inside. The house, my estate plan, my medical directives, and one document Charles had insisted upon years ago. Rebecca gently placed it on her desk. "The trust is exactly as we drafted it." I looked at the familiar signatures. Mine, Charles's. Rebecca continued. "The house is owned by the trust." She tapped another page. "And according to its terms, no beneficiary has any right to occupy, sell, refinance, or control this property while you're living and mentally competent." I let out a slow breath. "So nothing has changed?" "Nothing." "What if someone changes the locks?" She looked directly into my eyes. "They would have no legal authority to keep you out of your own home." "What if someone tries to declare me incompetent?" Rebecca's expression became serious. "That requires legal procedures, medical evidence, and court oversight. It isn't something a family member simply decides." I nodded. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Before I left, Rebecca asked one final question. "Do you trust your son?" I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said quietly, "I trust the boy I raised." "And the man?" I looked down at my wedding ring. "I honestly don't know anymore." Rebecca walked me to the door. "If anything unusual happens," "It will," she smiled gently, "then call me before you call anyone else." "I will." 3 weeks later, Daniel arrived unexpectedly. He was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "I've got great news," he announced. "What kind of news?" "I found the perfect place for you." I already knew what he meant. "The care home?" He nodded enthusiastically. "You'll love it." I looked at him carefully. Will I? It's beautiful. And how long would I stay? He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Oh, however long you need. Need. Another interesting word. He spread colorful brochures across my kitchen table. Private gardens, restaurant-style dining, medical staff available 24 hours a day. Everything looked wonderful. Too wonderful. Then he smiled. They have one room available. When? This Friday. So soon? They're in high demand. He leaned forward. I've already reserved it. I slowly looked up from the brochure. You reserved a room before asking whether I wanted one? For the first time, his smile faded, and in that tiny moment of silence, I knew this wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a plan, one that had already begun moving without me. I looked at Daniel for a long moment. He was still standing across the kitchen table, waiting for an answer he seemed certain he would receive. I'll think about it, I said. His shoulders relaxed immediately. That's all I'm asking. It wasn't. We both knew it wasn't. He wanted a decision before Friday. I wanted the truth. Those were two very different things. After he left, I picked up the brochures and placed them neatly in a drawer. Then I called Rebecca. He asked me to move this Friday. There was a brief pause. How did you respond? I told him I'd think about it. Good. What should I do? Rebecca spoke calmly, as she always did. If you choose to go for a short stay, that's your decision. I don't like the sound of if. I'm simply reminding you that nothing about your legal rights changes because you spend time in a care facility. I understand. But before you go anywhere, I'd like you to sign one additional document. What kind of document? A written instruction to the trustee confirming your wishes regarding the property while you're away. I smiled. I'll be there tomorrow. The next afternoon, I sat in Rebecca's office. Across from us sat Michael Turner, the independent trustee Charles and I had chosen years earlier. Daniel had never met him. In fact, I wasn't sure Daniel even knew he existed. Michael was a quiet man in his 60s, with decades of experience managing family trusts. He greeted me warmly. Mrs. Brooks, it's nice to see you again. I wish the circumstances were better. So do I. Rebecca placed several papers on the conference table. We're not changing your trust. I didn't think we were. We're simply documenting your instructions. Michael nodded. If you're temporarily away from your home, I will continue carrying out the trust exactly as written. And one else? No one. What if someone claims they're acting on my behalf? They'll need legal authority. Without they don't have it. Then they don't have permission. His answer was simple, clear, certain, exactly what Charles would have wanted. I signed the instructions. Rebecca notarized them. Michael placed them inside the trust file. Then continued me. Mrs. Brooks? Yes? If anything unusual happens while you're away, I call you, he smiled, immediately. Friday arrived with gray skies and light rain. Daniel pulled into my driveway just after 10. He was unusually cheerful. You ready? As ready as anyone can be. Melissa stepped out of the passenger seat and hugged me. We packed everything you asked for. I noticed she avoided looking directly at me. Whether it was guilt or discomfort, I couldn't tell. My suitcase wasn't very large, just enough clothing for what Daniel described as a short adjustment period. Before leaving, I walked slowly through every room. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway where pencil marks still showed Daniel's height as a child. I rested my hand on Charles's old workbench in the garage. I'll be back, I whispered. Then I locked the front door. Out of habit, I slipped the house keys into my purse. Daniel noticed. "You won't really need those." I smiled politely. "I've carried these keys for 43 years.
"They'll just get lost."
"I don't think so." He didn't argue, but I saw him glance at the keys before loading my suitcase into the car. The care home was beautiful, far nicer than I expected. Bright hallways, fresh flowers, friendly nurses, residents chatting over coffee. It wasn't the place that bothered me. It was the reason I had been brought there. The administrator welcomed us. "We're happy to have you, Mrs. Brooks." "Thank you." Daniel completed most of the paperwork while I reviewed each page before signing. Every page, every paragraph, every sentence. The administrator smiled. "Not many people read everything." I returned the papers. "I spent 36 years teaching students why words matter." She laughed softly. "Fair enough." After the paperwork was finished, she offered to show me my room. "I'll be back in a few minutes," I told Daniel. He nodded.
"Take your time."
As I walked down the hallway with the administrator, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Michael, the trustee.
"Everything is in order. Call if you need anything."
I smiled. "Everything all right?" the administrator asked. "Yes." It looked important. It was reassuring. My room overlooked a small garden. It was peaceful, comfortable. Nothing about it felt like a prison. In fact, several residents told me they genuinely enjoyed living there. That made me feel even worse for them. Because unlike many of them, I hadn't chosen to be there. After unpacking a few belongings, I excused myself and walked toward the lobby for a cup of coffee. As I rounded the corner, I noticed Daniel standing just outside the main entrance with his back to the building. His phone was pressed against his ear. He laughed, a confident, carefree laugh. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything.
"I'm changing the locks."
He paused while listening.
"Yeah, she's settling in now."
Another laugh.
"By the time she realizes what's happening, she'll have nowhere to go."
My heart sank. He continued speaking.
"And once we get the paperwork started saying she can't safely live alone,"
he laughed again,
"the house problem solves itself."
I remained perfectly still behind the partially open lobby door. Every doubt I'd been carrying for months disappeared. This wasn't fear talking. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was a plan. A deliberate one. Daniel ended the call, slipped his phone into his pocket, and walked back inside wearing the same warm smile he'd shown me all morning.
"There you are," he said. "I was looking for you."
"I just needed some fresh air," I replied. He picked up my suitcase.
"Ready to see your room again?"
I smiled. Yes. Because there was no reason for him to know what I'd just heard. Not yet. As he walked beside me down the hallway, he believed he was one step ahead. What he didn't know was that before sunset, I would make one phone call. And that single call would begin unraveling every move he'd spent months planning. Daniel stayed for another 20 minutes. He helped arrange a few family photographs on the dresser, adjusted the curtains, and reminded me where the dining room was.
Anyone watching would have seen a devoted son making sure his mother felt comfortable. When it was time to leave, he hugged me.
"I'll visit on Sunday."
"I'll look forward to it."
"You'll be safe here."
"I'm sure I will."
He smiled one last time before walking out the door. I waited. Not 5 minutes. Not 10. I waited almost an hour. Long enough for him to be well away from the care home. Long enough that he wouldn't think I'd do anything immediately. Then I closed my room door, picked up my phone, and called Michael. He answered on the second ring.
"Mrs. Brooks?"
"It's time." His voice became serious.
"What happened?" I heard Daniel talking outside. I repeated every word I remembered. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't speculate. I simply told him exactly what I'd heard. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, he said, "Thank you for calling immediately." What should I do now? Nothing. Nothing? You've already done the most important thing. What was that? You informed the trustee before the situation escalated. He paused. The rest is my responsibility. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't carrying this alone. Less than an hour later, Michael called Rebecca. Together, they reviewed every trust document, property record, and instruction Charles and I had signed over the years. Everything matched. Everything was current. Everything was enforceable. Rebecca then made one more call, this time to the county recorder's office. She requested updated copies of every document connected to my property. By late afternoon, the complete file sat on her desk. Nothing had changed. The house was still owned exactly as Charles and I had intended. No transfers, no hidden filings, no surprise paperwork. Legally, everything remained secure. Meanwhile, Daniel believed his plan was moving smoothly. That evening, he drove straight to my house. A locksmith's van was already parked in the driveway. The technician stepped out carrying a toolbox. "Good afternoon," he said. "You Daniel Brooks?" "I am." "You called about changing all exterior locks?" "That's right." The locksmith looked at his work order. "I'll just need proof that you own the property, or written authorization from the owner." Daniel smiled confidently. "I'm her son." "I understand. But I still need authorization." "My mother is in long-term care." "I'm sorry to hear that." The locksmith remained polite. "But I still need authorization." Daniel's smile faded. "I'll own the house eventually." The technician shook his head. "Eventually isn't today." Daniel reached into his folder and produced a copy of one of my utility bills. "This shows the address." "It doesn't show ownership." "My mother's not coming back." The locksmith slowly closed his toolbox. "Sir, I can't change the locks based on that." Daniel's patience disappeared. "This is ridiculous." "No, it's the law." After another minute of arguing, the locksmith returned to his van and drove away. Daniel stood alone in the driveway, staring at the house. He looked frustrated, confused, almost embarrassed. But instead of asking himself whether he was doing the right thing, he started looking for another locksmith.
The following morning, Michael received a voicemail from a second locksmith. He had been contacted by Daniel as well. Unlike the first technician, this one had searched the property's public records before accepting the job. That's when he discovered the house was held in a trust. Unsure who actually had authority, he decided to verify everything before proceeding. Michael returned the call immediately. "I'm the trustee." "I was hoping you'd call," the locksmith admitted. "The homeowner's son says his mother permanently moved into a care facility. She has not surrendered any rights to the property." "So I shouldn't proceed?" "You absolutely should not." "Understood." The locksmith canceled the appointment before ever arriving at the house. 2 locksmiths, 2 refusals. Daniel still hadn't managed to change a single lock. Late that afternoon, Rebecca called me. "How are you settling in?" "I'm comfortable." "Good." "I have an update." I listened carefully. 2 locksmiths have already declined to change the locks. I couldn't help smiling. So he really tried. He did. And they both required legal authority. I looked out the window toward the care home's garden. The roses were blooming in neat rows. For the first time since arriving, I breathed easily. "Thank you."
We're not finished yet.
What do you mean? Rebecca's tone became firm.
Attempting to change the locks was only the beginning.
I felt my stomach tighten. What else? She took a slow breath.
This afternoon, Daniel contacted your family physician's office requesting documentation about your ability to live independently.
I closed my eyes. So he really is trying.
Yes.
But he underestimated something.
What?
Rebecca smiled, and I could hear it in her voice.
Doctors keep records.
And you've been declared mentally competent at every examination.
Exactly.
She paused before adding one final sentence.
And next week, Daniel is about to discover there's another set of papers he never bothered to read.
The game he thought he'd already won was only just beginning. Sunday arrived right on schedule. At exactly 1 o'clock, Daniel walked into the care home's lobby carrying flowers and a box of my favorite lemon cookies. If someone had taken a photograph, it would have looked like the picture of a devoted son. He smiled at the receptionist. He greeted several residents by name. He even stopped to help an elderly gentleman pick up a magazine that had fallen to the floor. Then he found me sitting in the courtyard. "Hi, Mom."
"Hello, Daniel."
He handed me the flowers. "I thought these would brighten your room."
"They're beautiful."
For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things: the weather, my granddaughter's soccer games, a new restaurant opening downtown. It almost felt normal. Then Daniel leaned forward. So? How are you settling in?"
"I'm comfortable."
"That's good." He smiled. "I think this was the right decision." I looked at him calmly.
"Was it?"
His smile hesitated for the briefest moment. "You'll have people around you all the time now."
"I always had neighbors."
"They're not medical professionals."
"I wasn't looking for medical professionals."
He laughed softly, trying to lighten the conversation. "You know what I mean."
"I do."
Neither of us mentioned the house. Neither of us mentioned the locks. Neither of us mentioned the phone call I'd overheard. We were playing a strange game. The only difference was that Daniel didn't realize I already knew the rules. The next morning, Rebecca called.
"I have an update."
"I'm listening." "Your physician contacted me." I sat a little straighter. "What happened?" "Daniel requested copies of your medical records." "Can he do that?" "Not without your authorization." I smiled. "I never gave it." "No, you didn't." Rebecca continued. "He also asked whether your doctor would support a statement that you could no longer safely manage your affairs." My heart sank for a moment. "And?" "Your physician declined." I closed my eyes with relief. "She reviewed your most recent examinations." "What did she say?" Rebecca read directly from her notes. "Mrs. Eleanor Brooks is mentally alert, capable of making informed decisions, and has demonstrated no medical basis for declaring her legally incompetent." I couldn't help smiling. Facts. Just as I'd taught my students for decades. Facts mattered. Meanwhile, Daniel wasn't giving up. That Tuesday afternoon, he met with Melissa at a small coffee shop. Neither of them noticed the elderly couple sitting at the next table. "I don't understand," Daniel muttered. "Everything keeps getting delayed." Melissa stirred her coffee nervously. "Maybe we should slow down." "We've come too far." "What if your mother's right?" Daniel shook his head. "She's confused." "She didn't seem confused." "She's hiding something." Melissa looked out the window. "What if she's simply protecting herself?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a folder from his briefcase. Inside were renovation sketches, budget estimates, furniture catalogs, color samples, plans for a house that wasn't his. "I already paid deposits." Melissa looked worried. "How much?" He quietly named the amount. Her eyes widened. "You spent that without owning the house?" "I knew it would be ours." "You hoped?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "No. I was sure." For the first time, he heard how those words sounded. Hope could be understandable. Certainty had become dangerous. The following day, Michael, the trustee, requested a formal meeting. Rebecca joined him. So did an experienced real estate attorney who specialized in trust administration. Stacks of documents covered the conference table: property records, trust agreements, county filings, medical directives, every signature, every date, every amendment. The attorney carefully reviewed each page before looking up. "There is no ambiguity." Michael nodded. "None. The trust owns the property. The grantor remains fully competent. The beneficiary has no authority to occupy, alter, refinance, lease, or represent ownership of the residence." Rebecca smiled. "Exactly as intended." The attorney closed the file. "If anyone continues acting as though they control this property, we'll respond immediately." Michael folded his hands. "I'd rather avoid litigation." "So would I. But the trust exists for one reason: to protect Mrs. Brooks." "Precisely." That evening, I sat by my bedroom window, watching the sunset over the care home's gardens. One of the nurses stopped beside my chair. "Your son seems very concerned about you." I smiled politely. "He is concerned." "You're fortunate." I looked toward the orange light stretching across the trees. Sometimes concern and control look very similar. She thought about that for a moment. "I've never heard it put that way." I hadn't either. Until recently. She gently squeezed my shoulder before walking away. I remained by the window long after the sun disappeared. I wasn't thinking about lawsuits, or locks, or trust documents. I was thinking about the little boy who used to run into my arms after school, the teenager who insisted on carrying every grocery bag because he thought I looked tired, the young man who cried at his father's funeral. Somewhere along the way, that boy had become a man chasing a future that didn't belong to him yet. I still loved him. Nothing would change that. But love didn't require me to surrender my dignity, nor did it require me to ignore the truth. The next morning, my phone rang before breakfast. It was Michael. His voice was calm, but there was something different about it. "Mrs. Brooks?" "Yes?" "I think it's time for you to come home." My heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "He made one mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that leaves a paper trail." I stood slowly from my chair. "What did he do?" Michael took a measured breath. "He signed something." Using authority he never actually had. And in that single moment, everything Daniel had spent months trying to build began to collapse. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I simply held the phone against my ear. "What did Daniel sign?" I finally asked. Michael's voice remained calm. "I'd rather explain it in person." "Is it serious?" "It could have become serious." His choice of words caught my attention. Could have, not had become. That meant whatever Daniel had done hadn't succeeded. Not yet. "When can you come?" he asked. "I'll leave this afternoon." "I'll arrange everything." After we ended the call, I packed the same small suitcase I'd brought only a week earlier. The nurses wished me well. The administrator smiled as she shook my hand. "We hope you'll visit us again under happier circumstances." "I hope so too." I meant it. This place had never been my enemy. The people there had treated me with kindness and respect. The problem had never been the care home.
The problem had been the lie that brought me there. An hour later, Michael picked me up. As we drove toward Rebecca's office, neither of us spoke much. Finally, I broke the silence. "You said Daniel signed something." Michael nodded. "He did." "What was it?" "A renovation financing agreement." I frowned. "I don't understand." "He represented that he had authority to approve substantial work on the property." "But he doesn't." "Exactly." I looked out the window. "So what happens now?" "The company performed its routine verification." "And?" "They discovered the property is owned by the Brooks family Irrevocable Trust." I couldn't help smiling. "So they contacted you?" "They contacted me before releasing any funds." I let out a slow breath. If they hadn't, they might have relied on formal information. Rebecca was waiting when we arrived. Several folders sat neatly arranged on the conference table. She handed one to me. "Read the highlighted section." I adjusted my glasses. The document was the financing application Daniel had signed. Near the bottom, just above his signature, was a statement that read, "I certify that I have the legal authority to authorize improvements to this property." I looked up. "He signed this?" Rebecca nodded. "In his own handwriting." "But he knew—" She finished my sentence. "That he didn't have that authority." The room fell silent. Michael folded his hands. "We're fortunate the lender followed procedure." Rebecca slid another document toward me. "This is the lender's response." The former Senate read, "Application suspended pending verification from the trustee." Nothing had been approved. No money had changed hands. No construction had begun. The system had worked exactly as it was supposed to.
That afternoon, Rebecca sent Daniel a formal notice requesting that he meet with us the following morning. He arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. The confidence I'd seen only days earlier was gone. He looked tired, worried. As he entered the conference room, his eyes moved from me to Michael to Rebecca. "I didn't know everyone would be here." Rebecca gestured toward an empty chair. "Please, sit down." He did. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Rebecca placed the financing agreement in front of him. "Do you recognize this document?" Daniel glanced down. His face immediately changed. "Yes." "Is that your signature?" "Yes." "Before signing, did you read the certification above your name?" He hesitated. "I skimmed it." Rebecca's expression remained calm. "It states that you possessed legal authority over the property." Daniel looked at me. "I thought I would." Rebecca gently corrected him. "It doesn't say you would. It says you did." Silence filled the room. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." Michael finally spoke. "Intent matters." "But so do actions." Daniel swallowed hard. "I thought everything would work itself out." I looked at my son for a long moment. "No, Daniel." He slowly met my eyes. "You expected everyone else to work it out for you." His shoulders dropped. For the first time since this began, he didn't argue. Rebecca opened the trust agreement. "I think it's time everyone understands something." She turned to the page Charles and I had signed years earlier. "Mrs. Brooks placed this property into an irrevocable trust with clear instructions." Daniel listened quietly. "The trustee, not any future beneficiary, has the legal responsibility to protect the property according to those instructions." She looked directly at him. "You are a beneficiary." "But you are not the trustee." "You are not the owner." "And you cannot exercise authority over this property while your mother is living and competent." Every sentence seemed heavier than the one before. Daniel stared at the papers without saying a word. Then Michael slid one final envelope across the table. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "A formal notice." He slowly opened it. His eyes moved across the page. What does this mean?" "It means," Michael replied evenly, "that because you attempted to exercise authority over trust property without authorization, you are no longer permitted to enter or use the residence without your mother's express permission." Daniel looked up in disbelief. "You're banning me from the house?" "No." Michael's voice remained steady. "Your own actions made this necessary. You may return only if your mother invites you." Daniel turned toward me, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom." For the first time since this ordeal began, he wasn't speaking as someone expecting an inheritance. He was speaking as a son who finally understood what he had nearly lost. And I realized the hardest decision of all still lay ahead, because protecting my home had been simple. Deciding what to do with my son would be much harder. Daniel sat perfectly still. The legal documents remained open in front of him, but he wasn't reading them anymore. He was staring at the family photograph Rebecca had placed beside my file. It was one she had copied from an earlier estate planning meeting years ago. Charles stood in the center with his arm around me. Daniel, barely 20 years old then, stood beside us with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I don't recognize that man." I looked at him. "What man?" "The one in this picture." He pointed to his younger self. "He would never have treated you this way." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I don't know when I became someone Dad wouldn't recognize." Neither did I, and somehow that made both of us sadder than anything the lawyers had said that morning. Rebecca quietly closed the file. "I think the legal issues are resolved." Michael nodded. "They are." He turned toward me. "Mrs. Brooks, under the trust agreement, every future decision regarding your son entering the property is yours." He slid a single sheet of paper toward me. "If you wish, this restriction can remain in place indefinitely." I looked down at the document. One signature. That was all it would take. One signature, and Daniel would never again enter the home where he had grown up, unless I changed my mind. For several moments, I simply stared at the page. Then I folded it in half. "I'm not signing it today." Everyone looked at me, even Daniel. Michael spoke carefully. "May I ask why?" I smiled sadly. "Because people should never make permanent decisions on their worst day." The room fell silent. I continued. "My son has done something that hurt me deeply." I looked directly at Daniel. "You lied." He nodded. "You made plans behind my back." Another nod. "You tried to take control of something that wasn't yours." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I know." I took a slow breath. "But if I punish you while you're already ashamed, I'm teaching fear. I'd rather teach responsibility." Daniel covered his face with his hands. "I'm so sorry, Mom." "I believe you are." "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I already have." His head lifted in surprise. "You have?" Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Rebecca smiled quietly. I'd learned that lesson far too late in life. You can forgive someone without pretending nothing happened. You can love someone while still protecting yourself. Those two things can exist together. I stood and walked over to Daniel. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally, like the weight of everything he'd done had finally settled on his shoulders. "I have one condition. Anything. You earn your way back." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you stop thinking like an heir and start acting like a son." Fresh tears filled his eyes. "I will." No promises. He looked confused. Show me. 3 months later, I returned home, not because I had won, because I had never truly lost. The white brick house on Willow Lane looked exactly as I had left it. The maple tree still shaded the front yard. The porch swing Charles had built still creaked in the afternoon breeze. When I unlocked the front door with my own key, I paused for a moment. Not because I was afraid, because I was grateful. Grateful that Charles had insisted we plan ahead. Grateful that I had taken the time to read every document before signing it. Grateful that one careful decision years earlier had protected far more than bricks and lumber. It had protected my independence. Daniel kept his word. He never came to the house without calling first. He never discussed inheritance again. Instead, he asked questions like, "Can I mow the lawn? Do you need groceries? Would you like company this weekend?" He no longer treated helping as something that earned him ownership. He treated it as something children simply do for parents they love. One Saturday afternoon, my granddaughters come over to bake cookies. While they mixed the dough, Daniel quietly repaired the loose porch railing Charles had always meant to replace. When he finished, he knocked on the kitchen window. "It's done." I stepped outside. "You did nice work." "I learned from Dad." I smiled. "So you did." Before leaving, he handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "Open it later." That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in Charles's old reading chair and unfolded the letter. It was handwritten. The first line read, "Mom, I spent months reading contracts, estimates, and renovation plans. I should have spent that time reading the letters Dad left us instead." By the time I reached the last page, tears blurred the ink. At the bottom, he had written, "One day, if this house ever becomes mine, I hope it's because you lived a long, happy life inside it, not because I was impatient for tomorrow." I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Charles's photograph. Years ago, my husband told me something I never forgot. The true measure of a family isn't what they inherit, it's what they choose to protect. For a little while, my son thought he was protecting a future inheritance. Instead, he nearly lost his family. Fortunately, he learned the lesson before it was too late. As for me, I still read every paper before I sign it. Not because I expect the worst from people, but because experience has taught me that love should be given freely, while trust should always be protected wisely. And every evening, as I lock my own front door with the same key I've carried for 43 years, I'm reminded of one simple truth. The strongest lock on any home isn't made of steel. It's the wisdom to protect what matters before someone else decides its value for you.